Good morning, Ally. How are we today?
Jen, we're doing it. We're here. We showed up. We're late, but it's our show. We get to do what we want.
True. And we're 5 minutes late, which could be a lot worse, given your Wi-Fi issues and such.
Yes, the Wi-Fi. Not my fan. I mean, not my friend. It might not be my fan either. Maybe that's why it's not working.
It's like, yeah, you don't need to get work done today.
It's like, forget you. So Jen, we're here to talk about key milestones in writing and publishing. I like this topic a lot because so many people have no idea what goes into writing and publishing a book. And actually, I just was on a call yesterday with a prospect that was like, was trying to figure out if they had a sense of when they wanted the book to come out. And it seemed like time was of an urgency. And it appeared that the role they wanted me to play in this project was kind of ghostwriter / developmental editor kind of mishmash because there's already a document created. And I said, well, depending on what the state of that document is, right? If there's a lot of heavy rewriting and we're talking about a full length, memoir, this could be a 12-month endeavor just to get the script where we want it to be, like well structured, well thought out, organized, and go through multiple revisions and make it ready to hand over to a publisher. That could be like a year. If you want to smush that timeline down into 6 months, and there's a bunch of to happen in order to do that. I said, but then, you're looking at an average of 6 more months for a publisher to bring it all the way through. And she was, I think, a little bit shocked that we were talking about like a 12 to 18 month. Now that's on the long end. There's plenty of people I know do it on the shorter side. I find that there can be some challenges with doing it on the shorter side. So we can talk about time, but anyway, it was just interesting that I was having this conversation yesterday. It's one of the things that comes up routinely with clients. I feel like by the time I'm having a conversation, a lot of them want the book done yesterday.
Same.
And I think a lot of it has to do with not understanding all of the pieces and parts or milestones that go into the overall timeline.
I would agree. And I'm curious what your thoughts are, because we have like a whole, we have so many things on the hit list today, if you will, that we can kind of cover from a milestone standpoint. But just psychologically, what are your suspicions, hunches, etc., for why such a deep lack of clarity on how long things take when it comes to publishing a book? I'm always so curious about why people come rolling in after spending 30 years writing something and just think that it can be magically published in 30 days. I'm wondering, there's got to be some kind of breakdown somewhere. So I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Well, I'm going to kind of narrow it down to instant gratification. And I think that comes up in a couple of different ways. I feel like in one way, it's like, okay, people could just go and Google things. They could literally look up, what is a publishing path and what are the key milestones. But instead, I feel like people jump onto free calls with publishing experts, right? Without having done a lot of research, because jumping right into a conversation with somebody is like, now we're going to get the process started because I had this idea and now I'm going to go for it. I also think that because we're in a culture, especially a culture that allows for almost anything to be done instantaneously, and we now have on-demand models and self-publishing avenues like Amazon, for example, where you can upload something and print it and it's published in 24 hours.
You could.
I don't recommend that, but I think people are like, well, I know other people who have done it in a sliver of the amount of time. So why are you telling me that it's, 10 times as long, right?
Yeah.
So I do think that there's a little bit of that want it now. And I also think there's a little bit of like, I'm hoping that I'm going to be told what I want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And so people coming and like, well, I want the book for this event or for this reason, like especially in our kind of nonfiction prescriptive arena, where our business owners or thought leaders want the book to help with something. And then it's like, well, I need it done by X because of whatever reason. And I'm like, okay, well, it would have been good to know that a year ago. Right.
Yeah.
And it's hard because I know that in some instances, people are not coming up with the idea to write a book until they come up with the idea to write a book. Right. And that might not have been a year ago.
So planning can be hard.
Right. And so, so planning can be kind of this weird, it can be something that's hard to grapple with. But I think some of those things are things that I'm seeing.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that then when people are talking to someone they know that has written a book and they say, oh, I was able to do it in 45 days. I was able to do it in a couple of weeks. I was able to, it kind of like now implants this layer of like, oh, that we can do this really fast. But what they don't know is the quality of the person who did it in 30 days. Because if you're doing a book in 30 days, I don't want to make like a real blanket statement here, but I can't imagine the quality. There's something's going to be missing. Whether the writing quality is missing, the editing quality is missing, or the design quality. One of the three, if not all three, something's going to be wrong if you did it in 30 days. Like it's just a fact. Like there's no way, like even if you had every one of the best experts lined up to support a book and had the timeline where you only had it like for a seconds to flip it, still 30 days would not be enough time. So
I don't understand any of those. I don't understand the sponsored stuff where it's like, come and, finish your book in 30 days or whatever it is. Number one, I'm always a little bit confused by what they mean, because to me, it's like, are you finishing a draft? Are you finishing a fourth draft? Are you coming in with the draft already? Are you starting from scratch? Are you saying that you can do the entire thing in 40 days or 30 days? Like you have no outline, no draft, and then you're going to literally write and publish the whole thing in a month. Like, so number one, I'm like, what's really happening here? But two, I'm like, I'm a person who has been writing my entire life. I have a master's degree in writing. I've now worked with multiple clients. I've ghostwritten a number of manuscripts. I honestly do not know how it would be possible to go through the entire iterative process that is writing an entire full-length book in 30 days.
Yeah.
How? Are you working around the clock? Are you living on fumes? Are you like, to me, what it's basically implying is that you're drafting this thing once and you're calling it a day. Yeah. And that to me is super concerning, because I think if you cleared off everything in your calendar, you could easily draft a manuscript in a month, right? NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. The whole goal, right, is you write a certain number of words every single day for that month, and you basically end up with a full-length manuscript by the end of that month, right? I did it 1 year. I managed it. I have no idea what I wrote, though. I can't remember that part, but I know that I did it. I wrote that many words, but they were crap.
Yeah.
There's no way like that I would have then taken whatever I wrote that month and then turned around, uploaded it somewhere and said, done. And also had time while I was writing and working full time and whatever it was to then also figure out cover design and ISBNs and like, and this is all if you're just self-publishing, because let's be real, if you're going any other route, you're not getting it done in 30 days.
No, because there's just no logistical way to do it with quality and care. And anyone who is especially a publisher, is not going to put their name next to something that is not of high quality. They'll take their imprint off of it, which we've had to do. And it's not fun, because you don't want to be like, hey, you're making a poor decision here, but you are making a poor decision here. And also I don't want our name tied to it. So yeah. 30 days, it's a lot. So how do we start to like, where's the starting line here? Because it's like two different things, right? There's the drafting of the manuscript, like you said, easily can be done in 30 days. You could easily do a draft in 30. Well, it's maybe not easy to accomplish, but 30 days is enough time with the right strategy and right plan. But then there's the iterative process of key milestones from, okay, now it's drafted, then what? And then there's also the publishing milestones. So I feel like we have a two-pronged breakdown here.
100%. So the way I like to think of the entire book is that it's got a life cycle. And I think what we could do is we could go through that book's life cycle and then talk about the micro steps that's in each of those phases of the life cycle.
Yeah.
So in phase 1, we've got ideation and conceptualization, right? So the book becomes to be this idea in your head, and you're trying to figure out what you're saying, who you're saying it to, what's the content within the book, how is it going to outline and track, right? It's all the brainstorming. It's getting ready to do the thing. And then in phase 2, we've got manuscript development, bunch of micro steps in there. And then we're heading into production, right? So now we've swung over into publishing world. And from production, we're now going into publication, right? And then our last phase is like launch and promote, right? So 5 major phases, right? Mm-hmm. All of which take various amounts of time depending on who you are and who the publisher is, right? Mm-hmm. So if I was to just focus on where I shine, right, which is really in phases 1 and 2, ideation, conceptualization, and planning, and then manuscript development, right? Yeah. We've got in those 2 phases alone, there's maybe research, there's getting clarity, there might be doing interviews, there might be collecting resources, it might be developing an outline, right, for a book that's comprehensive and is like a business plan for yourself, but also includes your working table of contents and your chapter abstracts. So little descriptions of like what happens in each of those chapters, right? And if you don't know how to go through and do that, you're probably mapping out your book, structuring your book, right? Spending time to figure out how the puzzle pieces go together. All of that's happening before you even write a sentence.
Yeah.
At least if you're doing it with me, and I think if you're doing it well, without just like saying, I'm going to write a book, you sit down, you start typing, and then you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Or I don't know where I'm going with this, because you jumped right into drafting without thinking about maybe what you were trying to do.
And it seems like it's a shortcut, but it's actually not, because then your book is written off and you're not hitting the target reader the way you need to. And there's way more rewrites and way more editing later.
Yeah. And rewriting, like when it's significant, when like you have to almost rewrite everything that you've already produced because you didn't do the upfront work, you're actually, you're going to cost yourself more time. Yeah. So if you're going through all of that planning, strategizing, stage, and then you're moving into manuscript development, well, now we have our kind of this individual cycle that's happening within that phase. That's draft, edit, revise, right? So you're going to put all those words down on the page, get through a draft. You're then going to review them with an editorial eye to figure out what's wrong with it, what needs to be fixed, right? Then you're going to revise according to what you've determined are those edits. Mm-hmm. Now you've got a new version, right, that you're working with. Now you got to look at that new version, do the same thing. What's wrong with this version? Yeah. Okay, let's edit, let's revise, right? And you could go through that loop umpteen times, right? Yeah. Before you really get it super crystal clear and clean. Mm-hmm. Somewhere in there, I always recommend people do a beta reader round. So when you get to a really clear and clean draft where you feel like I've done the best that I can, I've argued the point as much as I can, I think that it's ready for outside eyes. You want to tap some of those ideal readers to do an early review of the manuscript and let you know what's wrong with it, right? Because at some point you can't see it anymore. So, if you're not going to work with an outside editor during that development, then beta readers are a good way to kind of check you in terms of where the manuscript sits. Now, I still recommend a developmental editor have a look at it, or, if not a full developmental edit, but at least a manuscript critique, high level strengths and weaknesses and where things can be tightened or refocused. Yeah. But like that's all happening just in phase 2, right? Yeah. So this is why, like, I'm like, you're telling me you got your whole draft done in 30 days? How many versions of that is that?
It just doesn't give it time to like really simmer and percolate and reflect on, is this really the direction I want to go in? Is this really resonating with the readers in the way that I want it to? Like, it just doesn't really give that reflective time to like really, because otherwise you're just kind of like cranking through it as quickly as possible. And that's just not like, and it's almost like, to what end? Like, what is why are we putting a timeline of 30 days on such a, like, how does that benefit us? You know what I mean? And I don't think it does.
The one thing that I could say is if it was like NaNoWriMo, going back to that example, like you're having a really hard time putting your butt in the chair, you need that container of accountability to at least get that first draft done because you hate drafting. Like coming up with the new ideas is painful. You would rather have the words and then play around with them. That's me. I would rather revise than draft. So like maybe a 30-day sprint is what I would call it to get that first draft could be really super useful. But drafting something in 30 days and finishing something in 30 days are very different things.
Agreed. Yeah, that's a good distinction that people need to walk away with. Like we're not talking about like, these are like very distinctive milestones.
Yeah. And so developmental editing would happen in there. If your publisher, let's say you're going indie or hybrid, if your publisher doesn't include as a part of their package a line or copy edit or a proofread, like those things would also be happening in the developmental stage, right? To me, anything that is developing the manuscript to its most final state for it to be published is happening in that phase 2. Where it gets a little bit nuanced, right, is like if you're working with those publishers that are going to give you the line edit, give you the proofread when it's time, like that's actually going to happen then more in production.
Yeah. And I think that we have a couple of questions about beta readers, which I love. So Sabrina, did I say that properly? And Wendy are both asking about beta readers. And I think I don't offer beta reader services. I don't believe you do either, Ally. No. Like
I don't, like me being the beta reader. No.
Well, that wouldn't really be a beta reader at that point because you're an expert, as am I. Like I think if either of us were reading something, it's not really a beta reader. Like a beta reader really is finding someone who's in your ideal audience, the ideal reader that you're looking for your book, that is just your average person, like your average reader, to kind of go in and really review, to say, give them really specific questions. I did this with my next book that will be out in February. So it's Promote Your Purpose. Let me see if I can get the subtitle. A Strategic Guide to Book Marketing for Nonfiction Authors Who Want to Grow Their Impact, Influence, and Income, I believe is my subtitle. It's got those 3 words. If they're in that order, I'm not sure. But I went to a number of authors that we already work with, and I went to a couple of friends to be like, hey, I need you to read my manuscript. And what I really love you to focus on is chapter 7 about sales, like book sales as a service, like reframing that. And it's just average people. They're not editors. They don't have like some kind of background in this, but they can say, hey, Jen, I really loved what you built out here, but like, I don't see the connection to the bigger picture that you're talking about, or I feel like you're giving me too many details here. And so I think with beta readers, I don't even think you need, I'm sure there are probably service providers who have beta reading services, but I would just find people that you can say like, hey, I'll give you a copy of the book when it's available, like a free, signed copy of it when it's available. If you can just give me your eyes on chapter 2 or chapter 3, like really narrow in the ask. So you're not saying like, hey, can you read this 200-page manuscript?
Now, here's something that I do with clients is I walk them through the beta reader process. I help them think about who they can ask. I help them think about what they should ask. I help them think about how they should deliver a copy of the manuscript to their reader and communicate with the reader and then collect that information. I also help my authors figure out what to do with the feedback that they get after the beta reader has completed the read. Now, in my instance, I would always push for beta readers to read the whole manuscript if possible. And here is why. Even though that is a longer time commitment, it will be more difficult for them to be able to weigh in on an individual chapter and whether or not it works if it's not in context with the 2 chapters around it or the larger argument for the whole manuscript. So if you can find a beta reader who has the time and capacity and willingness to read the entire manuscript, that would be my recommendation. I think you're getting more for that. And I'm with Jen, like if you can find people who do not need to be paid for this, then that is where you can save a little bit of money on a very expensive journey, right? Like this is an investment. So if you can find willing readers, all the better for it. And one thing that I have done on occasion is people that are not clients of mine, who follow me online or whatever, and know that I'm well connected. You know, there's been moments where I've taken a little extra time and care to throw a little goodwill somebody's way and actually make connections for them in LinkedIn of people that might be somebody they could invite to be a beta reader, based on what I know about the project and what I know of them. You know, as Jen said, these are your average readers, but what you don't want is just anybody who will agree. You want to think a little bit about your demographic, like who is your ideal reader. You want those people to be looking at your book, because if the people looking at your book as a beta reader would never buy your book or be interested in your topic on the other end, while they might be very, very objective and have a very unbiased perspective of what you're saying, they also might just kind of tell you whatever you want to hear, or be flat and unspecific with their feedback because they're not really invested in what you're trying to say.
Yeah, and I just looked up in November, we had a conversation called the power and process of engaging early readers. And I'm pretty sure in that conversation, we were talking about beta readers. So for those who were asking about that, I would go back and reference. It was in November, and it was one of our LinkedIn lives. And it's also available on both of our YouTube channels.
Yeah. Okay, we've got one other question. What is the first thing we do to develop writing? Missy, I hope I said that correctly. Could you give us a little more context when you say, what is the first thing we do to develop writing? Do you mean like the very first thing before working on a book? Or do you mean once you've got a draft, what should you do from there? Just give me a little more. And then
we both have books that address the entire writing process.
Yes.
Which I moved yours into my bookshelf, so it's not easy to grab it anymore. But
yes, knock everything down in the process.
Yes.
Oh, can you not reach yours either? Here.
No. Oh, look at
I shall show them
your bad back.
But they're twinsies.
Yes. So those are our book twins. So if anyone is interested on knowing how the writing and publishing process works, so like what's the first thing to do to develop writing? Like we both talk about it. We just have slightly different angles that we're taking to it, but they are still singing the same song.
Yep. Both award-winning, by the way. So like they're both, and I'm not saying that to be braggadocious. I'm saying that because other credible people within the industry that Jen and I are in have vetted these and have deemed them to be quality resources. Okay. Yeah. So yes, shameless plug for us to be promoting our own work. But you know, people have actually read these and said, yeah, these are really amazing resources for writers and authors to have. And so really all of the milestones that we're talking about today are expanded upon in more depth in each of our books. And I think that the books are linked in the show description.
They should be.
Drop them in. Okay, so we'll wait for some expansion on the question about developing writing. So I think I kind of wrapped up, you know, more or less what's happening in that phase 2 of manuscript development. So Jen, this is like, once we're out of that and we're into production, right? And we're working with a publisher, there's 15,000 itty bitty little steps that happen on your end before the book is actually published. So what's the, you know, I don't want you to go through every single, what's the high level rundown?
Well, I can tell you that our project plans have over 300 steps in them, if that gives you any indication on how many steps there are. So like the big milestones, so the big key ones. So in our case, we do line copy proofreading as part of our process. So I'm going to ignore all of that though, and just pretend for the sake of this, that we are getting a manuscript that's just ready to roll. So in that case, our first priority is going to be milestone number 1 is your cover. So we prioritize cover before everything else, simply because it's a marketing asset. As soon as you have your cover available, people now see, oh, wow, this book is real, it's tangible, you can use a 3D rendering, start posting it and putting it on your website, doing pre-orders, pre-sales, things like that. So number 1 is definitely the cover. And that can take, you know, a good bit of time depending on how clear someone's vision is for what the cover is. And on it, like in our case, if we're working with you on the whole thing, while the line and copy edit's happening, we're also working on the cover. So we're kind of running parallel tracks at the same time. So if we're getting something that's already done, we can kind of just dive right into the cover. The other thing is the typesetting. That's another big milestone. And the typesetting is what the inside of the book looks like. And that's making sure that the inside of your book matches what the outside of the book looks like. So that way there's cohesion. It matches your brand. So, like Ally and I work with people who are writing nonfiction books and memoirs. And a lot of times there's a brand already established that's coming into the conversation. So we want to make sure that the design is somehow connected to your brand. So that way when you show up in a room, everyone's like, oh yeah, of course that's that person's book, versus being confused because it just looks so disconnected from everything else you're doing. So cover, typesetting, then there's like metadata, which I would put a whole bunch of things under. So, before even doing the cover, like making sure that your title and subtitle are solid, having your book description really sorted out, knowing what categories your book belongs in, knowing what keywords to use for people to find your book. There's a lot in that vein. ISBN numbers, Library of Congress numbers, like all of the minutia that is 100% not sexy. So, but not sexy, but important. So that's kind of I think of like editing, design, cover design, and typesetting as like the big boulders. And then I think of all the metadata as like the little pebbles of sand that kind of surround the boulders that all kind of support those boulders being more visibly seen. And then I would say the proofing process, like that part of the production, which is also why if somebody says that they can publish your book in 30 days, there's something amiss, because even just the physical act of proofing your book and getting a physical copy of it, that alone can take 2 weeks, sometimes longer, depending on what time of year it is. So, we have to be mindful that you want to physically hold a copy of your book in your hand before your publisher or before you set it live into the universe, because if there are errors in it, or if you open it and you don't have the right margins, and now the reader can't read, an inch of your text because it's shoved into the gutter of the margins, you would have known that if you had ordered a proof copy of the book. So that's I think another big milestone that surprisingly, I talked to a lot of authors who were like, yeah, my publisher just, they just sent it, they made it live, and then I had to go buy my own copy off of Amazon. And I'm like, how did you not have an opportunity to look to see what it looked like before it was physically available for sale? But
oh my gosh, I have so many details about that too from just this year. So, and I won't go down that rabbit hole because that's not what today is about. But please, folks, one of the questions you should definitely ask or advocate for with whoever you're working with is to be able to see that physical proof copy ahead of anybody's shelves or being print on demand. It's so critical. It's really, really important.
Because you don't want someone else to have physically held the copy of your book before you have, which absolutely happens to authors on a more frequent basis than I feel like it should. And that it just seems like crazy to me for me to have published a book and then you, Ally, to be like, oh my God, I got to support Jen buy it. And then like you're holding it before I can, like wild.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, so not only is it just kind of like, wait, what? From like who put the most time and effort into this, who should see it first, which is the author, but then also definitely for like catching some very egregious potential errors, which in these two examples that I'm thinking of from this year were big ones.
Oh, I remember one of them. Yes.
Yeah. So
I may have pre-ordered that particular book. Yes.
Yeah. So if we've got time at the end, we'll share those ones. Okay, Jen, what else?
Okay, key milestones. I think we should go back for a second because you said at the start, a lot of times people have like an event or something that they're driving toward, and that's what's dictating their timeline.
Yeah.
I would love for everyone to just get a reframe around timelines, because I talk to people all the time. Where does July 24th, the day that we're recording this? And they're like, I need this book by October 1st. And I have to be like, no, like that's just, we would have to cut way too many corners to make that happen. And still August, September, like that's 2 solid months. Like you can get a lot done in 2 months, but you can't get all of it done in 2 months. And so what I would say is a good reframe for folks is, instead of thinking about whatever that event date is, try to reframe it of what assets can I have with me in time for that event. So for example, if October 1st, there was some huge conference that you're speaking at, big opportunity, What you would need between now and then is to have your cover and your book description. Those are the two things that are completely attainable in the next 2 months that you could bring with you, because what that can do is help you start pre-orders. So you can get some kind of pre-sales on your website. So that way, if you're speaking on a stage, you can say, you know, my book is still in production right now, but I'm super excited to share with this room, because I haven't shared it with anybody else, that my book is available for pre-order. Here's the QR code. Go purchase the book. So that way you're not losing any momentum. I think that's the hard part that authors struggle with, is that they see an opportunity because they are entrepreneurial, at least the folks that we're working with, and they don't want to lose out on that opportunity. But as long as you have a way to collect a pre-order, whether it's actually taking in their money to deliver the book later, or even just getting their name consensually on an email list, either of those is still building your momentum. And so I feel like that's a huge, huge piece that I think can kind of ease authors' nerves a little bit, because it's almost like, if I don't have it out by October 1st, I may as well not do it. And it's like, all right, let's not be that extreme either, because I do have people who kind of like fluctuate to those extremes.
Yeah. Well, and you know, that's, I think, why a lot of indie and hybrid presses, like, they start with the cover design once the manuscript gets handed over. Because once you have your cover design, that's a main asset, right? Yeah. Like, because now you have a way to promote the book with a visual, not just say I have a book and here's the title, but to actually have it look like this is a tangible thing that's coming, right? Yeah. And then also that marketing copy that ends up on the back cover, which also ends up in all of the online places to describe the book. If you have those two things and a link where pre-orders can happen, then you pretty much have what you need in order to sell the book without actually having the book. And you don't want to be cutting corners on the actual production of the book just to have it in your hand, right? Like, if the book is meant to boost your credibility, I can think of nothing worse than big mistakes or lack of quality in your book because you rushed it. Yeah. So that's not going to do anything for your credibility.
No, right? No. One of the things, so like, my new book is coming out, so I don't have a cover yet. We are so close to having the cover, and I have a conference that's coming up in 3 weeks. And I'm like, you know what I'm going to have to do? Like, I have, and I've shared this on our thing before. Here's the Publisher Purpose book, our award-winning book that Ally, you were talking about before. I give these out all the time to folks. And on the backside, it's to get the download the ebook for free. Because in my case, I'm trying to get more people into the PYP ecosystem. And by me giving away my book for free, that is packed with information, that is an entry point for someone to say, oh, wow, like, actually, this company can help me write the book. This company can help me market. It can help me publish. So what I will do for coming up is I'll put the new cover, or whatever the closest version of the cover is at the time, before I have to print and have, like, you know, cards on hand. And then I already have the pre-order page built on my website. Like, it is available. It is there. It just has like a coming soon thing for the book cover itself. So those are the things that we can think about, is how can we make the most of the things that we have available to us when the opportunity itself arises. And something as simple as a QR code, like in this case, it goes to download an ebook, but it could go to, you know, join my wait list, right? Like, there's so many different kind of calls to action that you can put there that still get people super excited. And the more that we can frame it in the sense of like, you're part of like this inside space, this inside community, the more appealing it is for people to want to take action. Like, even right now, like, I have not publicly announced that there's a pre-order page on our website for my new book. You can't even find it unless you know the URL to it. So like, it's like, anyone who's paying attention to this conversation, like, you now have like a little inside glimpse to something that's not coming out until February of next year. So if you can do that with your audience of people, it starts to like really engage people, both in online environments and in those like, you know, event settings and conference settings and things like that.
So if we go back to the timeline then, right, book comes out, we've got those last couple of phases, right? You've got like, okay, the book is out there, it's published, right? And you've got promotion. So those are never ending. You're always going to be promoting your book. And there's 1,000 different ways that you can do that. We're not going to spend our time focusing on that. So basically, when we're talking about writing and publishing a book, we're talking about like from blank page, right, through publication, right? What does that timeline look like in terms of months or years? And I'm putting years on it because there are so many people who I have conversations with who are like, well, I've been trying to do this thing by myself for 2 years now, or a year, or 3 years. You know, I've started it, I've stopped it 1,000 times. I'm not getting anywhere. So, you you know, when you're really looking at this whole process, right? Depending on how long it takes for people to conceptualize and draft, right? Like it can be a very long road. Now, if I get somebody who starts with me from the beginning, they've done nothing, right? I usually can get them through the process in 12 to 18. I've only had a couple of exceptions in having that be shorter. And they've really been go-getters who didn't have a lot else on their plates at the time. So they could really funnel all of their energy into developing the manuscript. But I got to say, almost every client that I've had who's come in saying, oh, I want to get it done in 6 months, oh, I want to get it done in 10 months, has inevitably ended up needing 12 or more. They're biting. It's like filling up your plate. Your eyes are bigger than your stomach kind of thing. Like they come in super motivated, raring to go, feeling like they're really clear. And then we get going and they have no idea what goes into really truly developing a well-written book.
Yeah, it's all a lot of work and it's an investment. It's both like, and I think that sometimes I get those conversations too, where like if I have someone who comes in and they're like, I need this done in 3 months, I know for a fact they're going to be the one that takes longer than our average author does, because there's just some, I don't know what it is. And we've had a couple of authors where we've gotten it done in 4 months, where I'm like, we can always go. I say this almost every day of the week. I'm like, we can go as fast as you can go, but you can't go as fast as we can go. Like it's not in return. So if you want an aggressive timeline, we'll do everything we can, because we can turn things around quickly, but it's usually we're always waiting for the author, especially in the edits. That's where things fall off. Like when I'm talking to somebody, if I have a proofread manuscript that is ready to go, we still do our own in-house proofread anyway. We don't allow anything to go out that we haven't proofread ourselves. But from that point forward, the timeline can easily be 4 months. But if you add editing into the mix, that is where it is a big old question mark of unknowns, because even if it should, in theory, take no more than 2 months to accomplish, I can't actually control the author's ability to actually get through the edits in a timely fashion as much as we would like to. It's a variable that I have no control over.
Well, but let's also think of this, right? If the manuscript was not as clean as it could have been going to the publisher, and you didn't take all the time that you needed during phase 2 development, and you end up getting back a manuscript with a ridiculous amount of edits, right? Then you're doing more work there during that stage because you didn't do the work up front, right? So to get the book where you want it to be, if you're working with a reputable and credible publisher, somewhere along the way, you are going to be putting in the time to get the manuscript where it needs to be. So you need to make a choice up front or later on, right? But if it's later on, you have a potential of slowing down your publication date and process, because you then have to take the time that you need to take the time to get it where it needs to be, right? So, these are things to just be aware of. So in terms of timing, right? Because we're kind of in that, we're talking about timing, right? How long does it take to do something and whatever. One of the questions that we get, Jen, right, is when should I start engaging a publisher? When should I start engaging an editor? And when should I start engaging a cover designer? So from an editorial perspective, I mean, I think as soon as if you're not going to work with a book coach on developing the manuscript to begin with, as soon as you've got a draft that you feel you've taken as far as you can on your own and you don't know what to do next, I would say that's the time to be looking for a developmental editor to help you round out the manuscript. Okay. I can't tell you like month 3. It's really a matter of like, when have you taken it as far as you can take it? Cover designer, well, that's assuming that you're doing this on your own and you're not working with a publisher who is going to provide that as a part of their package. If you're going traditional and you're getting a literary agent, all that jazz, you don't find your own cover designer. That's not on you. So really cover design is really on you if you're self-publishing. And so finding a cover designer, I mean, can start as you're developing the manuscript. That way you've got time to comparison shop, look at portfolios, look at examples, or it might wait until you're done developing the manuscript altogether and you're moving on to publishing pieces. So That one can be varied, but
it can. And here's a caveat I will put in there. I talked to a person about 2 weeks ago, and they had the most toxic energy I've experienced in a while. So there was that. And I was asking, like, what's your book been? They already had a book published. I'm like, what's your book been doing for you? Like, how are you nurturing it? How are you using it to get more business? Blah, blah, blah. And this person was so upset that the intended audience for the book was not the audience that was buying it, but it was actually people who did the same work that he did. And I was like, well, give me a link to it. Let me take a look at it. And I pulled up the Amazon page for it. And the title and subtitle of the book specifically spoke directly to the other people doing the same work. Like, there was nothing about it that felt like it was meant for an audience. It sounded like it was meant for the expert who's trying to develop their skills even more than they already have them. That was not the intended audience for the book, apparently, according to this person. So my point in saying this is, if you did not strategically think through what your title and subtitle is and who it is meant to attract, you could be wasting a lot of time by going and having your cover designed almost only to find out later that you actually screwed up your title and subtitle and it's not going to attract the right buyer. So I think waiting in at least through the developmental editing process, because once it's through developmental edits, at that point, it's just refining and further shaping the manuscript. It's not nothing new is going to be like catastrophically changing or anything like that. So at that point, I think you can be really intentional about the title and subtitle, but the subtitle really has to be crystal clear on who the book is for. And you can't be mad that the wrong people are buying it if the title speaks to the wrong reader, right? And like, this person was just really like indignant about it. I'm like, well, you could just go change your title and subtitle and probably solve the problem, but they didn't want to hear it, and that's fine. Not my place to figure out their problems, but I was trying.
So I have a story that's kind of adjacent to this, right? Mm-hmm. So I worked with a client. We thought we had gotten all the way through the manuscript. We thought we were done, handed it over, started to deal with cover design. The book had a very specific title and subtitle because that's what she wanted at the time. The cover designer that was pulled, super, super talented, but cover designers don't read the whole manuscript. Okay. Mm-hmm. They have conversations with the authors. They look at the title and the subtitle. They might look at an author questionnaire that's provided to them, either that they've asked for or that a publisher has provided to them. And the cover design, the cover design that came back was specific to the current title and subtitle, while also significantly missing the mark as to what the book was actually about. Mm-hmm. Because the subtitle and main title led the cover designer to believe that there was a particular essence that should be portrayed on the cover. Okay. So to be a little bit more clear, there was kind of some like double entendre kind of like stuff with the title and main title that was a play off of like 50 Shades of Grey, but the book was actually for hiring.
Amazing.
And so cover design came back with like a call girl, basically, or along those lines. Sounds very wonderful. Wrong way to market the book. Okay. Yeah. And then what ended up happening is that we ended up determining that when the developmental edit came back from that publisher, there was an external one that was done. The manuscript was actually really far off and it wasn't ready. And so it had to go back through developmental editing and another rewrite. And in the process of doing that, total new title and subtitle. And now going to be an entirely different cover. Okay. As a result. So you really do need to be crystal clear and nearly 100% done with whatever it is that you're doing with your manuscript and your titling before you can really get a cover designer involved.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, like, I think that what we both have in common is that we really want people to get a really high quality experience, a high quality book, and not be overpaying in directions that are completely unnecessary. And I think something like this is one of those areas that it's completely avoidable And at the same time, like sometimes we just don't know what we don't know at the time. And that's why relying on experts for guidance and working with the right experts, they will push you to the place that's possible. And then at the end of the day, be like, okay, you still have the final say. Like you still have the final say in what you want it to be. So if you want it to, you know, have a double entendre and have a call girl, you know, on the, by all means, like, you know, go for it. But like ultimately we're trying to help produce the best quality that's going to impact the readers in the most intentional way possible.
Yeah. So Jen, what's your opinion then on when an author should engage or start shopping for a publisher?
I think when you're still in the editing process is a great time. Even if you're still in the writing process, I don't think there's such thing as too early to start the research on the right publisher, because ideally what you want to do is that you want to make sure that you are exploring all of your options. You're looking at the different types of publishing paths that there are. You're looking at the different types of publishers within those publishing paths. You're asking friends for recommendations. You're doing your own research, looking at books that you respect, seeing who might have published them, like really exploring what that whole range looks like. Because what you don't want to have happen is that you've spent all of this time and energy writing. You get to the end of it. You hired somebody to help you with the editing process. You're getting to the end of that. And then all of a sudden have a panicked moment of how am I actually going to get this out into the world, and make a really irrational, rushed decision. Because that's when and why people get taken advantage of, is when you're not operating with all of the data points, because you don't have enough context to compare apples to apples. You're just looking at like, oh, hey, this person said they can do it in 30 days and it's going to cost me $500. But you didn't take the time to research to think like, wait a minute, how could it only take $500 to get all of these things done? And so I think earlier the better, but I would say probably somewhere where you're like midway through kind of editing, where, or, you know, developmental editing, where you're still kind of like deep in the trenches, but also just want to start like looking at what your options are, and just give yourself a timeline. Say within 45 days, I need to know how I'm publishing this and who I'm publishing it with, and, you know, what path I'm taking, and then just kind of go from there.
And that makes me think we must have done an episode, if not this year, last year, about choosing a publisher.
Yes.
So
in October, we did finding
back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
Was October 24?
Yes. Finding the right publishing pro for you in your book.
Okay, sweet. Other episodes that I just want to highlight for people who are tuning in. In February of this year, we talked about what numbers you should know in publishing. That one paired with the October one would be really good to listen to if you're in that process of shopping publishers. But then March of this year, we also did, is my ego really the one deciding my publishing path? And so I think those three together would be like a real trifecta of great information to have and be considering before you're shopping for a publisher. And I know that in Do Not Write a Book, we have an appendix in the back that's about different questions to ask when you're vetting any kind of publishing professional, but definitely a publisher. And Jen, you also have something available, right? On
yeah, it's on our website. It's the 9 questions to ask blueprint, and it's the same thing. It's just different questions to ask potential publishers to just identify, like, am I going down a path that feels right for me? There's also a chapter in my book about it. So the information's kind of everywhere between the two of us, because again, at the end of the day, we're trying to help people make the right decision for them, which may or may not be with one of us, right? And that's okay. Like we still want what's in your best interest, even if you're not working with us. And that's why we do the show.
Exactly. So, Christy, I tried to respond to you, but then I realized I went to YouTube, which isn't helpful. So what I was attempting to say to you is that I know that you are now pretty much an expert in all the things. Congratulations to you on your book coming out this fall. But man, imagine how much further ahead you would have been if both Jen and my books were out like 3 years ago, and we were doing Unscripted way back then. So now we can only hope that with the 2 books out there in the world and this show happening the last couple of years, that we're catching authors in these early stages, so we can help you prevent, pitfalls and such.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I still have conversations on like a weekly basis where someone has been taken for a ride. Actually, this week's honestly, that could be like a whole segment. Like, this week in predatory behavior. But I was talking to somebody who had worked with a ghostwriter. Actually, I connected you to this person, Ally. And when I was talking to them, they were saying how a couple years back they engaged with a ghostwriter and the person like never delivered on anything. But the way that they were talking about it, I was like, wait a minute, this like the way that they were describing the process of this person, I'm like, that kind of sounds familiar. And I was like, would you mind just giving me the initials of the person that you're talking about? And it's exactly the same person who burned two of my authors, two of them, and took $20,000 to ghostwrite and then delivered nothing for it. And they all had to sue. So everyone's gotten their money back because they all had to sue the same person. And it's a pretty what I believed, a well-respected person in this industry. So even the well-respected ones ask for referrals, do the due diligence, do the research. Because I was like shocked that this person's like left such a trail of chaos in their wake.
I just don't understand. Like, how can you?
How do you sleep at night when you're just like, oh, I'm just going to take 20,000 and I'm just not going to deliver anything for it, and I'll wait until they take me to court? Like, how is that?
But how is that like a winning solution for you either? Like, if you end up with the cash grab, but then you have to give it back.
Your guess is as good as mine. I'm just like shocked and disappointed, and I don't get it. I really don't get it, which is why I appreciate you. Because I know that I can send anybody to you. And if you're not the right person, you will know someone who is, and you're also not going to screw them over, because that's like important to just make sure no one gets screwed over.
No. And that's why I have a really big beef in the industry with anybody who opens up a conversation from this side of the table, and a provider who opens up the conversation with, what's your budget?
Yeah.
That drives me insane. I've had so many people in the last however many years that have had conversations with like other people, and they've said that one of the first things that these other ghostwriters or whatever have asked them is like, well, how much? Like, how much are you working? And then they, it's like, that's like the end of the conversation if there's not enough money there. And while ghostwriting is expensive and we can't necessarily just take on projects and not get paid for them, I understand that, but like, maybe get to know the person first, hear their story, hear them out, try to be of service. And so I don't know. And then it's like, on the other hand, if it's somebody who will do it for peanuts, also be leery, because like, what kind of quality are you going to get for $500? Right.
And I think the big question to ask now is like, how are you using AI in the publishing of my book? Because like, you don't want to have some AI generated cover, or relying on AI to be the only proofreader, or, like there's so many, like, because that way it could be less expensive. Sure. But like, is it going to be quality? Probably not, because no AI service is at a good quality standpoint currently.
Yeah. Carolyn, thanks for joining us. I'm seeing your comment. So it could be that person doesn't know what they're doing, and whatever they're offering for 10,000 isn't worth it. But also, I just want to put out there that writing coaching, book coaching, editing, publishing, these are actually big dollar investments. So 10,000 is actually
a pretty good deal.
Out of the realm of possibility,
depending on the deliverables, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if it's like they're willing to be your assistant and they're asking for 10,000, like you'd want to know what exactly are they assisting with, and how does that break down? And that's a totally okay question to be asking. But in the writing and publishing world, when most editing is based on per word, and you're in a 45,000 word manuscript, and you've got price points of 4 cents a word and up, depending on the type of editing, like it adds up, right? So, that 10,000 could be a red flag, or it actually might be a good deal, or right on the money. It all depends on what services that's being provided.
What the offer was.
Yeah.
Ally, in February, our show was called "What Numbers Should I Know in Publishing?" So, Carolyn, that might be a good episode to go back to, because it really kind of broke down like just different price points for different parts of the process. And it is about comparing apples to apples, and I think that is the hardest part, which is why I said start researching early, because then you'll know if you were comparing good to good versus like two completely different universes.
Yeah, exactly. I remember like when I started to get into this game and having to like charge, I was very nervous about putting out figures because I was like, oh my God, it's like so expensive. But the work that I do and how it all rolls out, like, it's an investment.
And I think you and I are both in the high quality, higher end game of this too, right? Like because the industry has like really low budget, just crank through assembly line, get things out. Whereas you and I are both very high quality focused people. And that comes with a higher budget necessary.
Yeah. High touch customer service. And what I always say to people is like, I'm not just doing manuscript development with you. Like I'm also coaching. And I'm also educating you, and I'm also, with you unlimited voice messages in between calls and in email and doing extra research. And I mean, it's not just me sitting over here talking at you or telling you what to do with a sentence. It's a lot more comprehensive than all of that.
And that's why people just need to know what they're looking for. I think that's the key too. Like the more clarity you have on what you need, the easier it will be to find the right partner for you.
Yep. Okay, folks, we're going to be back again next month on the 28th. We are going to be talking about how can I ensure I write a strong manuscript. I don't know if that's the exact title, but that's basically what we're going to be talking about. So, Missy, if you're coming back to this conversation, you really want to ask about how to develop your writing, that might be a great one to tune in for. Same time, same place. Here live on LinkedIn and YouTube at 10 Eastern.
Yes. Ally, do you have any final shameless promotion before we hop?
Do I have any shameless promotion? You know what? Yes. I am going to be running a 3-hour live accelerator on Saturday, August 16th called Your Book is Your Business. And this is getting you to not just think like an author, but think like a CEO. So we're coming together that day to build out a loose shell of a business plan that's based off of your book. So this is perfect for nonfiction authors who are not ready for publication or either just starting or in development. So I will drop the link to enroll separately outside of the.
Perfect. I love it. And Dr. Beatrice is here saying she's happy to see us wonderful ladies. And we are happy to see you as well. Too bad we can't actually see your face. And my shameless promotion is that I am doing a book marketing survey right now. It's bookmarketingsurvey.com. So anyone who either is currently writing a book, has already written a book, it's already been out for years, I'm looking for data points on what is and is not working from a marketing standpoint. So I will also drop a link to that in the comments. So if anyone wants to participate, and share it with any other authors that you know who might want to participate too. I'm looking for like a big sample size of people. I'm already almost at 200 completed surveys. I would really love to be over 300 in a couple of weeks. So that is my plug for the day.
Awesome. All right, Jen.
All right.
With you. Thanks everyone for joining us live. We'll see you next time.